On Windsor Road in Slough, a family lived above their butcher's shop. It was a happy home. But on Monday, 11th April 1881, tragedy struck. Hezekiah Revel had been born around 1843 in Cambridgeshire. He trained as a butcher's assistant, and in 1874 he married Mary Ann Chudley in Reading. The couple went on to have 2 children, Alice Jane, born 1876, and Emily Gertrude, born in 1878. At the time of Anne's death, she was pregnant with their 3rd child. The couple worked in the butcher's shop together, but also employed others. One of these was 16-year-old Alfred Augustus Payne, who had worked for the Revels for 2 years and knew how to slaughter animals and use a chopper. He began his working day at 7 in the morning and finished at 8 o'clock at night. Another employee was 15-year-old Philip Glass, although some sources say he was 14, who acted as a butcher's boy. It was known that Mrs. Revel argued with Payne frequently over the amount of time he spent in local pubs and for being late to work, so he threatened to leave, but Revel managed to persuade him to stay. On Saturday, 9th April, Mrs. Revel had words with Payne again. She believed he'd stolen money from the till, while Revel himself believed the young man had stolen a steak. Glass came in for some suspicion that weekend too, as some steak had gone missing, and Revel had gone to his mother, Mary Ann Glass, to ask about it. On the evening of Monday 11th April, Mary Carver of Arbour Vale arrived at the shop and asked for half a pound of steak. She paid with a 2-shilling piece, which Glass, who was serving her, then took to Mrs. Revel, who was sitting working on the accounts in an inner room. It was Mrs. Revel who handed over her 1 shilling and 6pence change. Her husband was out at the time, having to go to baker James Wilmot and to Mr. Green's before he visited the White Hart pub, where he was informed something was wrong at home. Glass left the premises around 8:20 p.m, while Payne left the shop roughly 10 minutes later. A neighbour, Mrs. Eliza Beasley, went round to see Mrs. Revel at around 8:30 p.m, or just after. She found her sitting on her chair, her head thrown back, and saw she'd been attacked with a cleaver or something similar. She'd been hit on the back of the head and on the back of the neck. She immediately raised the alarm. Shortly afterwards, Police Sergeant Hobbs accompanied her back to the scene of the crime, and he noted the ledger was opened at 19th March. On the floor lay a pen, some coins, a handkerchief, and blood-saturated matting beneath the chair. Dr. William Urban Bruce was called for, but there was nothing he could do for the dead woman. Dr. Edward Dodd also arrived, but nothing could be done. Superintendent John Dunham, head of the local Slough Police Office, took over the investigation. A search was made of the house, but one thing stood out. It was a strange note which read, "You will never sell me no more bad meat, like you did on Saturday. I told Mrs. Austin at Chalvey that I would do for her. I done it for the bad meat she sold me on Saturday last." It was signed H. Collins, Colnbrook. Also found at the property was the murder weapon. The cleaver had human hair and blood on it. Police spoke to Revel and called on Payne at his home. He denied knowing anything about the murder, but seemed unsurprised by the news. The obvious suspect was Revel, but he was soon eliminated from the inquiry and the focus became on Payne. He was approached that same night and taken to Slough police station. At the inquest held the following day before Frederick Chardsley, the coroner of South Buckinghamshire, and lasting 2 days, Payne deponed that he'd said goodnight to Mrs. Revel and had left at 8:32 that evening, having looked at the clock on his way out. He was seen by Miss Kate Timms at 8:36, crossing the road from the Crown Hotel to the Red Lion, rather quickly, having met Glass at 8:25, as she was posting a letter. It transpired that one of Mrs. Revel's daughters had come down for a glass of water. She'd heard a sound like her mother choking, then heard the door slam shut. She opened the door at the foot of the stairs and saw her mother sitting on her father's chair, with her throat cut. She later said she was looking so bad and was white. The girl then rushed back upstairs, lying awake all night, terrified and upset, telling her father the following morning what she'd seen. Police also suspected Mrs. Revel had known her killer, as she'd not risen from her chair, and that robbery had not been the motive. On Thursday, 14th April, 35-year-old Mrs. Revel was buried in St Mary's churchyard. On her headstone, it states she was murdered. Meanwhile, the investigations continued. The note was sent off to a handwriting expert, Mr. Talbot, in London, and Payne's clothes were checked for bloodstains. Payne was rearrested at his home on Saturday 16th April. He was brought to Buckingham Petty Sessions Court on Wednesday 20th April and stood in the dock, listening to the evidence. Mr. Springle Thompson, Mr. D.L. Hall and Mr. E.C.S. Thompson, the county magistrates, presided. Captain Thyrwhit Drake, the Chief Constable of Buckinghamshire, and Superintendent Dunham represented the police authorities, while Payne was represented by Solicitor Mr. R.H. Barrett. The movements of Revel and Glass were examined, but the evidence pointed to Payne. After testimony from Revel, Glass told the court Payne had stayed behind to prepare his hams in the shop. As he was leaving, he saw Payne leaving the living room where Mrs. Revel was sitting to go to the back kitchen. He didn't notice if he had anything in his hand. The handwriting expert deponed that he'd checked Revel's handwriting and Payne's against the note from samples, and although the writer had tried to disguise it, he was sure it was Payne's. Throughout, Payne insisted he was innocent, but after deliberating for 2 hours, the jury returned the verdict of guilty, and he was remanded at Aylesbury Jail. The case then went to the criminal court. At the assizes of the Midland Circuit Court at Aylesbury on Thursday 28th April, Payne was indicted on the charge of murder, but pleaded not guilty before the judge, Mr. Justice Henry Charles Lopes. The prosecution on behalf of the Crown was led by Mr. J.C. Lawrence, while Payne was defended by Walter Attenborough, who brought into question the author of the handwritten note and told the court no blood had been found on Payne's clothes, no motive had been established, and that Mrs. Revel may well have been murdered by a thief who took fright after attacking her. Once all the evidence had been presented, the judge deferred his summing up until the next morning. He told the jury that there was to be no guesswork, no speculation will do. It is not for the prisoner to prove his innocence. It is for the prosecution to establish his guilt. Following their deliberations, the jury returned the verdict of not guilty. Payne was a free man. The only suspects in the case the police looked at were Revel, Glass and Payne, and they were utterly convinced it was the 16-year-old. There simply wasn't enough evidence to convict him. Revel moved to Brighton following the case and opened a bakery and confectioner's shop in Southover Street, which he ran with his daughter Alice. He went on to marry Anne Wells, then in 1913 married Alice Tullett. In 1933, he died. His daughter, Alice, married Nathan Grigg and died on 2nd January 1921 at Bethnal Green in London. Emily married Charles Butler and died in Brighton on 24th December 1947. As for Glass and Payne, they continued to live in Slough, both marrying and having families, although neither worked in the butchery trade again. No one has been brought to justice for the murder of Anne Revel, and the case remains officially unsolved.